Hey guys, so that's my last day in Japan. It's 2:45. I just found a quiet park. I mean quiet, there's sometimes the train that comes by. It's a hard video to make because I spent 13 days in Japan and I loved it, and I'm leaving tomorrow in the morning and I feel so sad because this holiday was just amazing. I hope you noticed this amazing kyapu, which says something like try hard, desperate. That's a joke, obviously. I think it's in Kansai-ben. Anyway, I'm going off topic, but yeah, it's my last day. I'm feeling sad. I think it's gonna get a bit emotional. I don't know. Yeah, you can tell I'm a bit nervous, I think. So it's Japanese progress update number 20 already, and let's get started. I've got quite a lot of things to talk about. I think it's gonna be a long one. So grab some tea, grab anything you want, popcorn, whatever, and let's go through all the points that I have to offer to you today. I'm so excited to be filming outside actually. I wasn't sure where to go. I wanted to go to Kobe, but I ended up not having enough time at all. So I decided to come to this park because there's nobody here, obviously. Everyone is working. So let's maybe have an overview of my Japanese language learning journey and talk about this series of video because it's number 20 already. That's crazy. I think I've started this series like 3 or 4 years ago, and obviously I'm still learning Japanese. I haven't made any crazy progress, although there's definitely been like learning that's happened. So in this trip, well, before that trip, I had not really practiced my Japanese much, or like I wasn't learning anything new. I was still trying to review what I had learned, but I forgot a lot. So before this trip, I was like, oh, it's such a shame, I should have carried on, and I felt a bit guilty. But actually, after a few days, I felt like I managed to have full-on interactions, not conversations. I'm not fluent enough, but I had like full-on interactions, with staff and stuff, and it was so cool. It felt so good to be able to communicate with Japanese people because like it's something that people talk about a lot, but it's really true, is that English is not always enough in Japan. Like people will know very basic English, but so people will try to speak English to you, but sometimes they can't understand you, or like they can't speak much. So it's really useful to speak Japanese. Literally, like 2 days ago, I went to some kind of station in Namba, so I'm in Osaka, by the way, and I was trying to find out information about a bus to the airport, and you would think that it's a touristy sort of office thing, you know, because it's going to the airport, but the staff didn't speak any English. And I'm just like, I'm not even gonna be like, oh, you know, people should learn English. No, I don't believe that at all. Like if you're a local shop, whatever, that's fine. You don't have to speak Japanese, but I just felt like it would be useful to speak English in these situations. But the good thing, don't know what that noise is, let's give it a minute. So I still managed to speak some Japanese, thankfully, and I managed to make myself understood. But what I mean is basically, if you can learn Japanese a little bit, like do learn it, because it's going to go a long way. Like it's going to help you a lot. Even if it's not perfect, my Japanese is not perfect, but I feel like I always manage to get my point across, get what I need, etc. So other things I want to talk about is the fact that, like, of course, during your trip you will learn a lot, like you will practice, you know, your grammar, etc. And you can even make it like a study trip. So like in the morning you can study a little bit, which is what I did. Like before doing an interaction, like going shopping or whatever, I tried to like memorize some sentences or revise some of the ones I couldn't remember very well. And that's a good way for you to put into practice what you've learned. But in a trip, you're not going to learn that much, especially if you're a beginner. That's actually something I've talked about with Matt vs. Japan. I did an interview with Matt vs. Japan, which was so cool. So I'm very excited about like editing it and stuff, because I was just excited to meet him, and our conversation was so interesting. But he was making a point basically that, you know, traveling to Japan is not going to teach you Japanese, and that is true in the sense that it's not going to be like, you're not going to have a huge breakthrough. I feel like after 13 days I'm getting like used to like speaking Japanese and being around Japanese environments. Doesn't mean I understand everything, but I feel like kind of more accustomed. Like it doesn't feel as weird, and I kind of like automatically speak Japanese to people, like basic Japanese, right? But still. But an important factor is the fact that like weaker your Japanese is, the less progress you're going to make. And I know that sounds crazy because you think, at beginner level, that's when you learn so many new things because everything is new, right? But the thing is, you're not going to be having like intense conversations constantly on holiday. You're going to be like doing touristy stuff, so like your touristy Japanese will be probably on point. But aside from that, like I tried to have I was in many situations where I was with native speakers, like going to a karaoke or that kind of stuff. This is getting really hot. And like if they didn't speak English, I would like struggle a lot to like get even any like basic interaction. Because everything is in Japanese, which I know it's obvious, but it really sounded like you could make a lot of progress, but you don't. And that's my third time in Japan. And every time I've made some progress, but it's not going to be like huge. I think the only moment you will make progress in a country is if you live there and like study there, or like somehow you get like intense interaction with lots of input and lots of practice. But I feel like just living in the country, that's not enough, which is another point me and Matt were talking about. Like lots of people can live in a country for like years and still speak very basically the language. May it be Japanese or even in English-speaking countries, you see that everywhere. That's not shaming. It's just like for people not to think that you automatically become fluent. That requires a lot of active effort. And I feel like in this trip, I actually like made a point of putting myself out there. I tried as much as possible to always like start a conversation in Japanese and explain my situation. At some point I wanted to get my money back for clothes because they didn't fit me in the end, and I had to like find a way to phrase that. So you can definitely get out of your comfort zone and learn, but you need to do that. Like it's active. It's not like easy. Like I just hang around in Japan and I'll become fluent eventually. But that's a downside. But at the same time, that's kind of to be expected. But I feel like people do think that Japanese people are going to speak English necessarily, which is not always the case. So I guess kind of be prepared for that. My positives, I guess, is that Japanese people are so kind. There's always going to be exceptions, right? I'm going to put it back because I think it's a good look. But like people are always going to be like, most people are going to be super nice. I've been to karaoke parties, first time with a friend I knew, so obviously like that was kind of like comfortable environment, like I knew her, so like she was like my point of reference, I guess, especially because she's Japanese. But then another time I was like with people I had met in the karaoke, but then like the person I was with like left early and I decided to stay, and like I had talked to a guy and I was like, please can you take care of me because I'm on my own. Literally I was like this. I was not very sober, and the guy like actually took care of me. It was like super nice, always like making sure I was okay and stuff. Like he walked me to the station like for me to get home safely, so like super kind. My Japanese friend, she explained to me that in some situations Japanese people kind of feel like responsible for you. Like they'll make sure you're like okay, you're fine, you're eating enough or drinking enough. Depends on the context, but like they will take care of you. Obviously to a point. Like I'm not saying like use them. That's not what I'm saying. But like if you have to be kind to them back, obviously, and I was. Yeah, it's just not something you find in France. It's really hard to explain. But they'll be really like nice and kind and thoughtful, and like. The other day I was thinking about it and that made me really moved. I felt really moved because I'm like, wow, that's so nice. And I feel so lucky in this trip to have been able to experience, I'm not going to sound like arsey and be like, oh yeah, my experience was the most authentic. No, but I definitely have the luck of knowing natives that are my friends, like not just friends I run into or like I meet during a random trip and then I lose touch with them, like they're actual friends. And it's so good because I get like real life experience. Like I go to their houses and we go to restaurants and like they make me discover foods that I don't know, and like they'll just be super nice. With people I met at the karaoke, I went to like local restaurants I don't even think I would dare to go on my own because everything is in Japanese, or like I feel like kind of shy about it, But I feel like my experience was amazing, and I love that. I don't even care. I mean, I didn't leave Osaka, and like there's so many things I could be seeing around, which I did already anyway, most of, because it's my third time here. I didn't need to necessarily do overly touristy things, but I just wanted to do fun stuff, like do as much as possible native-like stuff. We talk about being like a native speaker in terms of speaking or like language skills, but I feel like also culturally that was so valuable and so cool. My next point was that, yeah, that's something that's quite important actually, and that's kind of nice and rewarding, is that Japanese people, very often they'll be really like, maybe not impressed necessarily, but they'll be really happy that you try to speak Japanese. Like, I remember like sometimes I would be like, oh, like, sumimasen, eigo ga wakarimasu ka? And they'd be like, chotto. So I was like, hai. だから日本語で説明してみます and they're like, oh, okay, like, you know, I'm gonna try to explain in Japanese, and they were like, oh, and like I try, obviously like my Japanese is not perfect, I'm like N4 sort of, not fully, but I'm early to mid N4 I would say. Still need to do a lot of revision, and yeah, and they really like appreciate it, and like whenever you leave, like, you know, they're like, oh, thank you, like arigato. And I think they feel honored, and it's a sign of respect. I don't think that's something you get when you learn English though. Like if you go to an like English speaking country, people won't be impressed by your English usually. They might be with me, but that's because I'm really advanced. But like if you're a beginner, they'll just like ignore you. You would be just a normal like person. You're very like common instance of like non-native speaker of English, right? But in Japan, it's kind of more rare, so you kind of get that benefit, and like they always like, oh, jozu, nihongo jozu, and it's really cool. And I've had this experience where I spoke to the guy in Japanese, and he said like, oh, nihongo jozu. I was like, oh, arigato. Like they're really kind. And I saw him the next day, and that's when I was trying to get my money back for clothes, and he helped me so much. He was like, oh, I remember you and stuff. Like, you just get better treatment. Not that you would get bad treatment if you only speak English. It's just that the service is going to be less extra, I guess. It's gonna be good. Like Japanese people are really good with the customers. Like it's embedded in the culture. They'll do as much as they can to help you. But with Japanese, it definitely goes a long way. I could not insist on that enough. And then something else that I talked about with Matt versus Japan. I mean, he came up with the idea, and that's really true, about like traveling and, you know, like the point of traveling to the country where your target language is spoken. Is that it gives you motivation, and that is really true. I never really thought about this, but like I experienced it, but I never phrased it. But it's so true that it makes you so much more motivated, because I mean, I think that tests your motivation. You know, if you really enjoy the idea of speaking that language and like dealing with the culture. Obviously, I say culture loosely because as a tourist, I barely scratch the surface of what Japanese culture is, right? But it kind of gives you have a glimpse into the culture still, the good and the bad. And I'm lucky as well that I speak to, or like I hang out with native speakers, so I can ask them questions, and I feel like I learn a lot about how Japanese people kind of work, because it's so different. Like you can't assume anything almost. Like the way they communicate is completely different. They will maybe not always dare to say no, but you kind of need to take the hint sometimes, so it can be quite subtle sometimes. But yeah, anyway, so visiting the country can give you motivation, and I feel like it motivated me. I'm looking forward to go back to France just to be able to study, but also obviously want to stay more, but I can't. But I think it motivated me to definitely come to Osaka regularly. I don't know how often, like my plan, I guess, I'm really transparent with you guys, but so I'll say that. But my plan is to hopefully be able to make more money off YouTube, because that would allow me to go to Japan more often. And I would like to be able to go to Japan once a year, taking into account that the flight for me was a little bit over 1,000 euros. And in total, I spent, you know, eating, accommodation and stuff, I spent probably another 1,000 euros, maybe a little bit more than that. So it's not a cheap trip, and I made it cheap. Like I wasn't going to Tokyo and stuff, like otherwise that would be like, I don't know, 500 euros more. But I would like to be able to come more often and like really practice my Japanese. I feel like I've never felt so motivated to learn Japanese. Like it's so cool, so amazing. I've even bought 3 books which I forgot to bring. It's Learn Japanese from manga or with manga I think, 1 and 2. The 1 is kind of for beginner. I mean, it is for beginner, so I'm probably not going to learn from it, but I felt like that was a really interesting book. So I think I'm going to review that on the channel and probably go through whatever I don't know yet in Japanese. I feel like the book is thick enough to probably cover up to N3, I would say, I think. Or definitely N4, because the books are thick. And I bought a Kansai Ben book. Kansai Ben means Kansai dialect, which is also kind of Osaka Ben, but I mean, like people use one for the other sometimes. Technically it's different, like Osaka is a part of Kansai, right? But Osaka is the most influential part of Kansai because it's the big city, right? So I'll be reviewing that. And yeah, I'm hoping I'll go back to Japan in a year. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about? Maybe the fact that it's really hot in Japan. Like, I'm gonna tell you right now, the weather, like lots of people are like, yeah, it's the same in my country. Like, yeah, like especially Latino people, they'll be like, or Brazilian or whatever, or even Portuguese people, they'll be like, oh, like, yeah, in my country, it's always 30 degrees, it's really hot, but it's fine, it's all right. But Osaka is different. It's 30 degrees now, and it feels like kind of fine, because even for Paris, 30 degrees is hot, but fine. But in Japan, like, it feels like 38, honestly. It's so humid, and that's not even the worst part, because the first time I came to Japan was July, and it was even hotter. It was 33 degrees, so 3 degrees more. So bloody hot. So plan for it, get used to it. But the good thing is that there's air conditioning everywhere, so it's not even that bad. You just need to take breaks. Drink lots of water if you come to Japan during the summer season. Anything else I wanted to talk about? Yeah, I feel like after 13 days, you kind of, like I said, start to get like in a Japanese mood, sort of. It's kind of hard to explain. I might be limited, but I feel like I'm getting comfortable. I can like function as a tourist quite easily. I can almost do anything I want as a tourist, which is so cool. And yeah, I'm so grateful for that. It's so amazing. Oh, one thing I wanted to talk about is making friends in Japan when you don't speak Japanese, and when you're a gaijin. That's two different things to talk about, but when you don't speak Japanese much, it's quite difficult, and that's to be expected. But I feel like, how to explain? Even if they speak some English, like often, and it's easy for me to forget, but like when I was starting to speak English, my level was not very high. And it was so tiring, always looking for your words and stuff. But for Japanese people, that's harder because the language is even more different, so they have to think harder. And that makes it hard to make like good relationships without speaking Japanese. I'm saying that for those of you out there that think they're going to make lots of friends, Japanese-speaking friends, I mean, like Japanese native speakers. That might be the case, you might. I mean, I have Japanese-speaking friends, but they speak English like we speak in English fluently, and that helps. So I'm looking forward next time to be able to like speak better Japanese, so I can at least have more interesting conversations. I feel like I'm not so far. I feel like when you reach N3 level, you can start having some conversations. You won't be able to express very complex thoughts, but you start getting somewhere. But yeah, I hope that next time I'll be, I'll keep motivated. I'm planning on maybe taking Japanese lessons, but that's a matter of money, because obviously if I spend money on lessons, that means maybe I won't be able to go to Osaka anytime soon. Like, it's a balance. But also I feel like in terms of behavior around gaijin, so gaijin being foreigner, like gaikokujin, I didn't have any negative experiences. I think really the fact that I speak some Japanese, like that goes such a long way. Like people are so happy. They're like, wow, that's so cool. Like Nihongo jozu all the time. And that's really cool. I do feel though that Japanese people might be, like in terms of building, like if it's like a one-off interaction industry, like asking for directions, like it's fine. They're not going to be like avoiding you or whatever. But like when it comes to like making like long-term relationships, I feel like Japanese people are kind of, I wouldn't say scared, but like they don't know how to behave because they know the culture is different. So that puts pressure on them, I think, because they want to, I mean, I'm over generalizing. There's going to be some exceptions, but I mean, like overall, they want to give a good impression. So if they don't know how to navigate your culture, they might feel shy. I mean, that's the impression I have. I'm not a specialist of Japanese culture, bear in mind. But yeah, so I think that was it. I'm so happy I got to spend these 10, 13 days in Japan. That was so cool. But yeah, I need to get going. I'm going to do some shopping, buy some treats for my friends, family and stuff. Hopefully my suitcase is not going to be like full. It will be full. Hopefully not too heavy. And yeah, I will see you when I'm back in France in a future video. Mata ne.